I walk out of the police station and see Peter standing by the open trunk, where Madison is now healed enough to be a single lump of flesh. I nearly reach the trunk when Peter asks, "What the hell was that about?" Before I can answer, Chancellor Strom walks out of the station, catching Peter's eye and leaving him no doubt as shocked as I was when I first saw Strom in person. Peter, keeping his eyes on Chancellor Strom, says, "Damn, you're a lot more important than I thought, Mr. Advisor." I'm anxious, still processing about what Strom has said and what he needs to be done. There are 2 killers on the loose. One, this major criminal I came to the station to help track. I know he's dangerous, but he cannot complete the act. He cannot actually kill. He must be a lower priority now. And the other, someone who has found a way to kill, but no, more fundamental. Someone has found a way to disrupt society. The single truth we all believe to be true has been changed. That could be more dangerous than any single death if people found out. "Hey!" Peter snaps his fingers. Knocked me out of my headspace and I focus. "Mind telling me what Chancellor Strom was doing here?" I'm caught off guard. It's the most obvious question and I didn't prepare for it. "Do you know my last name?" I say. Stall question, but perhaps legitimate. "No," Peter says. "I guess I don't. Suppose you don't know mine either. Baker. Peter Baker." And he reaches out his hand. "Niven," I respond, extending my hand and shaking his. "Bill Niven." "It's good that we get to know each other, Peter. This is serious business with your major criminal. Chancellor Strom was here just now to say that it's of utmost importance to find out who's doing these tortures, these awful things. It was partially the truth. I couldn't tell Peter someone has died. At least not yet. I couldn't risk the news spreading, but I figured I would need Peter's help to find the real threat. At a minimum, I'd need his car, and better, the weapons that come with every police station." The look on Peter's face says he doesn't believe the lie. "Chancellor Strom believes finding this torture is the most pressing thing?" Peter asks rhetorically. "Okay. And he believes you are actually the best person to help the station solve this urgent matter?" "Yes," I responded, with less than complete certainty. "We both, together, were the best suited to solve this. You have 120 years experience at the station. I've got about a decade reading about how this job used to be done in the old world. Together, Chancellor Strom thinks that we're the best chance of finding this rare criminal." "Get in the car," Peter says, and he quickly closes the trunk with Madison's body and heads to the driver's seat. I follow, and as I get in, I see a taunt face on Peter. As the car starts moving, I ask him several times where we're going, but he doesn't give an answer. A few minutes on the road, I try again. "Do you want to explain what we're doing?" "You go to that bakery, coffee spot this morning," Peter says. "What?" "Did you go? It's across from the station, popular spot. It's run by 2 volunteers, a couple, the 2 women." "Yeah," I say. I noticed a passing sign that we're moving towards the city center. "Yeah, I had a cup of coffee there this morning." "What do you think they get, huh?" "Couple. What do you think they receive from council for volunteering there?" "I don't know," I say. "An apartment? A nice one? Maybe a car? Maybe they got some time built up where they don't have to volunteer study for a few years. Some favors like that?" "Sure, I guess that seems fair." "Fair," Peter says, raising his voice slightly. "Do you know what I get for my volunteering? For my volunteering that I've been doing for 120 years. "No." "I get this car." Peter waves one hand around the interior. "And I get this weapon. He raises, laid out her jacket to show his Alaro rod, a standard weapon assigned to police volunteers. Now that's not particularly fair, he continues. You saw this morning with Madison what we have to deal with. Think that just happens every once in a while? No, that happens every day. That is half of what police do. People like you don't care because you don't know about it. Nobody seems to give a shit about the daily fucking jumpers. But me? People like me that volunteer at police stations. Oh fuck. People who jump off buildings all the time to absolutely no one's horror in exchange for a car. Now that seems like a pretty fucking rotten deal. I don't know. I start slowly. I didn't know people jumped like that. We people don't talk about it, but I don't know why. Peter, where are we going? Peter relaxes the tension in his shoulders that had built up during his rant. He lets off the wheel as the car slows. People don't talk about jumpers, he says calmly. People don't like to talk about those so different that they can't see any of themselves in action like jumping off a roof. They can't emphasize with that type of thing. The car is stopped now. I look at the buildings and see we're near the very center of the city. No, people don't talk about jumpers because there's nothing they can do about them, Peter continues. But you know what else police volunteers do, Bill? What? They hide monsters, Peter says, getting out of the car. I stay confused by his last words. Through the window, I see him go around the corner of one of the massive city center buildings. Monuments to Welvin that grow taller as the city expands ever outward. I get out and walk around the corner. And there, Peter stands holding open a door well hidden from the street. Come on, let's see the monsters, Peter says. Who are they? I ask, looking through the grated floor that reaches into a pit no fewer than 40 meters deep. At the bottom of the pit, dozens, maybe hundreds of men, some women moan, cry, and scream. The lighting is poor. Just a few hand lamps litter the makeshift hole. Maybe just 2 sit at the bottom of the pit itself. Do you feel bad for them? Peter asks. I look down the pit again, trying to make out more detail. I see flashes of flesh when the hand lamps are angled right. Looks like emaciated bodies, bare flesh for everyone in the pit. A small shock comes over me as I believe I see one man eating the flesh off another. What could they possibly have done? That major criminal you're supposed to help us find? They're not so unique. Pretty common, actually. See, police stations have been dealing with this type of thing for decades, centuries. You mean? Yeah, Peter interrupts. In that pit is every torturer, every dismemberer, every head basher and pregnancy stabber our station has ever caught. 400 years worth of one station's crimes right here in that pit. 400 years, I say. You kept people in here for 400 years. Do you know how much room a police station has? 20 fucking cells. Well, there's more than 20 fucking criminals that our station has had to deal with. Dangerous, bad motherfuckers. And this is it? He pointed to the pit, followed a path around the makeshift room at the bottom of its massive building. This is a solution we came up with. This is how we deal with these criminals, these monsters. Because those designers who studied didn't plan on them. They didn't plan on what to do with them. Fuck the roads. This is the bad design. One station? You mean every station has a pit like this? I know of a few more pits, Peter responds. But every station? I don't know. I mean, every station must have this problem. I don't know what solutions they would have come up with, though. How can I not know this? How can people not know about this? Because council says not to talk about it. That's why. Because this is a utopia, right? Live forever, Do whatever you want. And all you gotta do is volunteer. So this pit raised some questions in your mind? I nod. Yeah, well, it raises one in mine. Why the fuck did Strom show up at our station to deal with a common problem he's known about for hundreds of years? Him and Council didn't give a shit about all these other criminals. Certainly didn't care how we caught them. What the fuck is so special about you? I'll give you that maybe you were originally sent here to help chasing down one of these fuckers we'd thrown in a pit. But that doesn't explain why Strom would be personally involved. He's aware as much as the rest of the council of these pits. So what is so special about who we're chasing now? I pause. You're right. Chancellor Strom didn't want to talk about the criminal you're chasing. I look down at the pit, and flashes of emaciated faces in the dim light. A scream from below echoes in the room. We can talk about it, but please not here. I didn't fear Peter Baker. I didn't think he would drop me in the pit. I just wanted to get out of that room. Peter and I head towards a car, rounding the corner of the massive building. He must see it before me because it starts running. Split second, I speed up too. Peter stands in the middle of the wide local road, and cars traveling on either side of him stop. All eyes are on his hands as he reaches for his waist and pulls out his Aleo rod. I've only ever seen one on video. Across the street and by Peter's black car is a lump of a man. He's flesh and bone and barely a face. His limbs don't look like they can fully extend as the skin joins in unnatural ways. I see now that it's Madison, deformed but slowly beginning to resemble a man. He has his left arm wrapped around someone, a woman, screaming. In his right hand he holds another Aleo rod, no doubt taken from Peter's car. Key! A bass gurgled of a voice is heard from Madison. Key, right now. Peter, he reaches for his pocket and takes out his key with his left hand, holding his Aleo in his right. Let her go, and I'll throw you the keys. Madison lets out a gurgled scream as I see the woman bite his arm. In his other hand, his Leo's crown expands, and 7 sharp points on the top of the rod that stick perpendicular to the shaft. He stretches his arm back and slams the rod down. The sharp edges of the crown cut into the woman's stomach, and she begins to bleed. Madison tears the Aleo out, and the sharp edges are left in the woman's stomach. The woman falls to the floor as Madison reaches out his hand. The key! He screams, in the bass gurgled tone echoing from his deformed flesh. Peter stalls for a moment as Madison pushes the side of the Aleo, and the sharp edges pushed into the woman's stomach on the ground respond. And an electric shock jolts her and she forces a scream. He pushes the button of the Aleo 7 more times, and the woman continues to be shocked. A few clicks and the screams stop. Peter approaches Madison now, just as Madison is trying to grab the woman off the ground. I've tried that before, Peter says, walking faster towards Madison. There's a trick to it. Close now, Peter raises his Aleo and slams it into Madison, still struggling to pick up the woman, and rapidly tapping the shock button on his rod. The key, Peter starts, as he tears his Aleo out of Madison, leaving behind the shard crown edges. Key is you can't shock more than every 30 seconds. He pushes the Aleo, and detached fragments burn and shock Madison, flailing, partially smoking his flesh. I run across the street and see Peter trying to help the struck woman to her feet. It'll be alright, I hear him saying to her. Fragments come out easy, and if the rod holder isn't pushing that button, they won't hurt you. His comments might be reassuring to anyone stuck with the Aleo rod before, but clearly the woman was still in dire pain. Will you help me? Peter says, staring at me. I shift the weight of the woman onto my shoulder and help her to the side of the road. She's still moaning, but Peter is insistent we leave her. Looking at the woman's bloodied stomach, I hear Peter struggling and see him with Madison's body. I reluctantly leave the woman. I had never seen a Alero injury before, and didn't realize the chemical and electric damage it did to the skin, to the flesh once its edges had jammed into the body. I get to my feet and help Peter support Madison, and quickly realize we're dragging him to the side door, and the pit. Inside, Peter gets out from Madison's weight and leaves me holding the deformed flesh. He lifts the grating to the pit and says, "Come on, dump him in." I look at Peter, frozen. What? No. He's too dangerous to leave in the car. He's not just a psychotic dangerous to himself. You saw what he did to that woman. How do we get him out of there later? We don't, Peter yells back. I shake my head, and supporting Madison's weight, I begin to move him back outside. Peter begins to recover the pit as I move back to the car. By the time Peter is caught up, I've dragged Madison back to the trunk, and I'm rolling him in. At the last second, Peter gives me a hand and closes the trunk shut. Without a word, we both enter the car. You don't condemn a man for eternity because... I start. Because he's dangerous? Peter interrupts. We picked him up for avoiding volunteering and education. Now you want to throw him in a pit? We met him because of his avoidance. I want to throw him in a pit because he's clearly dangerous, not just to himself, but to other people too. Out of the window of the stopped car, I can see the woman on the side of the road recovering. I can't argue, and I think Peter realizes this. Before he has the car moving, Peter turns to me and says, 2 things. 1, if we're gonna have that psycho in the car, lock the door when you fucking leave, because that trunk stays unlocked if the doors are too. 2, in addition to that pit, a psychotic like Madison is the type of situation the council already knows about and accepts as normal. So now, you think you can tell me what's new and fucked up shit is happening that Chancellor Strom needs to get involved? I'll tell you. I stay muted. When we get there, I start giving instructions to head towards the eastern edge of the city. 40 minutes in relative silence, the only noise in the fast-moving car is Madison banging on the trunk. A muffled scream by Madison could be heard. He is clamoring to go back to his apartment, but neither Peter or myself can be bothered to give him much focus. We're too absorbed in our own thoughts. For Peter, he must be thinking about what I'm hiding, what Strom could be too. He knows how many horrible things his station has sealed in a deep, dark pit, and with full knowledge of the council. He could only imagine what could be so horrible and now worth hiding from his station. For me, I'm just running through the pit and the criminals. I imagine the long work it must have taken to hollow out a pit and a room. I wonder where the station sourced the material for the grating, or how they could have gotten so many hand lamps. Think about the families of the people in the pit. If they ever wonder where they are, if people are searching for them. Most of all, I think about what Peter said. Council telling police stations not to tell the public how criminals are dealt with. How many other problems are solved this way? I wonder. We arrive at the eastern edge of Welvin, where new buildings, bakery stations, and schools are just beginning to take shape. Over time, buildings will grow larger as the population increases, but for now, the highest building in this area is just 5 stories. Everything new in the last few months. Car stops where I direct Peter, and we both get out of the car at the same time. Peter heads to the trunk and pops it open. In an instant, he takes out his Aleo and jams it into Madison's body before quickly closing the trunk. Those fragments will stay in for a while, Peter says, his face close to the trunk. If I come back and the car's making noise, I'm gonna push this button. He pushes it on the side of the Alero. Madison's scream is heard from the trunk. As I start walking, I turn towards Peter and ask, I know he tried to escape by taking that woman, but isn't what you're doing still cruel? His main offense is just trying to get out of his mandatory volunteer in education. Peter stops walking, waits for me to stop. I already didn't throw him in the pit. You want me to feel bad for that piece of shit, too? No, Never mind. What? Peter says, standing firm halfway between Shine's building entrance and the car. What's your problem? I turn back a few steps and meet Peter's gaze. Those people. Who decides who goes in the pit? Our police station does, and the volunteers at that station. And the council knows who they throw away? Not specifically. Peter, I yell frustrated. Don't you think a bottomless pit from whence you can never return is a bit of an overreaction for your station's problems? Overreaction? I'm just saying. Look, I'm sure it makes some sense to throw people in there. But Madison, you're willing to throw him in. I'm wondering who else is in there. There's a pause between us before I continue. Peter, what I'm going to show you is a much bigger problem than jumpers. It's a much bigger problem than your major criminals that you've been keeping in a pit. I don't know who caused the problem you're about to see. I don't know how to solve it either. I just want us to be on the same page, so that we don't overreact. Bill, you're still afraid to tell me what Strom had to talk about? You sure a pit out of the view of public wouldn't solve your problem? I think for a moment. If I had the person in front of me who figured out how to kill, pit is probably the only sensible place they would go. I just want to make sure whatever we do it with clear minds, I say. I was thinking clearly when I dragged Madison into that room. I pause. Just don't overreact. Peter and I walk into the new apartment building together. Peter makes for the elevator, but I tell him no. We're just going to the second floor, and I head towards the stairs. Must be a pretty young person we're seeing, Peter says. Edge of Whelm, lowest floor. Who is it? The founder, I say. My mentor. I know they usually get center city, tallest buildings, but this mentor liked to stay on the edge of the city, lowest floor. Used to say it gave him perspective, felt good to see progress. With Peter at my side, I knock on Zachary's door for a moment. I think there might be a person conscious, alive inside to answer. Soon the door opens slightly. I see a pair of tender brown eyes that I hadn't gazed upon in a long time. And see again that below them are deep sags of black and brown skin. Who is it? She says, before she recognizes me and opens the door fully. What the fuck, Bill? They told me you'd be here hours ago. She leaves the door open as she turns around and walks into Sean's apartment. My ex, I say, meeting Peter's eyes and follow Kate with Peter a few feet behind me. Inside the small apartment, the man on the floor takes attention. Zachary Shine, 400-year-old teacher, artist, founder, former council member, once even the Chancellor. 400 years, gone. He lie on his back, his body completely still. I get on my knees and start inspecting the body. It's cold. I feel no pulse. Strom had said he recently passed, that they had measured his brain activity to confirm he was dead. But I saw no machine or people in the apartment other than Kate. Peter is watching over me as I inspect the body. He hasn't asked a question yet, but I imagine he's beginning to realize. Even if he doesn't understand what dead means, he'll understand the practical reality of what a lifeless body is and how the world has never seen one. I leave Peter gawking at Shine, desperately trying to figure out what had happened, and I head towards the kitchen where I'd seen Kate quietly go once we walked into the apartment. By the sink she was, up to her usual self, scratching the rock tile off the countertop, breaking little pieces and sliding them into several dozen clear plastic bags she had started carrying over a decade ago. Kate had aged to 30, about twice as long ago, but somehow she looked older now. In the years of self-abuse, her skin is blotchy, dark where it shouldn't be. What are you doing? I say. She doesn't even bother meeting my gaze, instead looking down at the kitchen tile and continuing to peel away. You know what these are good for? She says, flatly and uncaring. And they're good for kitchen counters. You know what I mean. You mean they're a good base ingredient to make a glitch? That's right, she says, a long acknowledgement like she's glad I could mutter it. Why are you here? Who found you? She looks up from the counter. Strom's men found me. Brought me here. Told me to wait for my old shithead ex-husband. She walks towards me, hands still full of tile. Said council would give me a new apartment if I waited here for you. Fucking Christ, Kate. Do you even know why you're here? Because of you, she said softly, as she tries to walk past me and out of the kitchen. I grab her wrist, hand still holding the kitchen tiles. Fuck off, you piece of... she says, as she tries to flail her hand. Damn it, listen to me. Peter walks into the kitchen as Kate and I are reenacting a scene where we'd relived many times over. Our hands lower, we appear to stop fighting, and pretend everything's fine. Is anyone going to explain what the fuck is going on with that man out there? Peter says. Still holding Kate's wrist, I say, he's dead. Muscles in her wrist go limp, and I let go of Kate's wrist. She looks at me, so does Peter. What the fuck do you mean? Says Kate. I leave Kate where she stands in the kitchen, walk past Peter. In the living room, I stand over Zachary Shine. Peter and Kate meet with me on either side. Tell no one, but what we all think about living forever. That might not be quite right, I say. And the three of us look at Zachary Shine's lifeless corpse in silence. A moment later, Kate breaks it. She laughs. Light at first, but soon it builds, and her face is wide and her eyes tearing. I woke up after that. As I learn more about Bill's world, I have so many questions about the simple mechanics of how things work. I'm also thinking about the unusual name coincidence of Chancellor David Strom and Simon, the undergrad researcher who once went to his school in Buffalo and worked on a digital world project. It's too early to say that there's a connection, though. Strom, while not the most popular name in Sweden, is common enough that I'm not sure there's a connection at all, or if there is, what it could be. For now, though, I'm left with the email from Simon in response to several questions I sent him this morning. I asked him how far along the research project he thought Dr. Hahn was. If it was possible that the simulation I'm describing in my dreams could exist in her lab. I also asked if he might know why I'm having these dreams, and if he understood why Dr. Hahn wasn't allowed to speak to me. For most of these questions, Simon Strom does not have particularly helpful answers. He responded that he believes a simulation that complicated does not exist in Dr. Hahn's lab. On my dreams, he was even less helpful, with a response that indicates he simply thinks I'm making it up. On why Dr. Hahn wouldn't be able to speak to me, though, Simon gave an answer that might just be a clue. He wrote, Dr. Hahn has very little control over the project. In fact, so does the university. While Buffalo is a fine school, it is not the premier research lab in the country or the world. The only reason the project is run out of Buffalo is because Google is funding it. If Dr. Hahn can't speak, it must be because of Google. So now, I'm left with a weird question. If Google is issuing a gag order on Dr. Hahn, seems no point in speaking with Google corporate directly. But do I know anyone that has a gripe against Google? Is there someone who might know about projects they're funding and is angry enough at the company to talk to this reporter about it? What do you think? I might be able to figure out on my own, but any help is appreciated.